Hi there. Today we're looking at the present perfect and the present perfect continuous. So, I have eaten, I have been eating. First we'll compare them with the past, and then we'll compare them with the present. Let's start. Here you can see some information about John Smith and Jane Smith. You can see the years they were born in, and for John Smith also when he no longer existed. You can see their professions, and you can see a number of books. I'd like you to write a short sentence for each of them. Your sentences must include a form of the verb to write, and I simply want you to answer the question, how many books? Pause the video if you want. I'll show you the answer in a few seconds. He wrote 5 books. Past simple. Completed past action. Okay, so he started writing and finished writing in the past. She has written 10 books. This is something that started in the past. Well, probably not 1950 because she was a baby, but at some stage in the past she started to write books, and she's written 10 books, and in theory she could continue to write books after now as well. He can't. Well, maybe as a ghostwriter. Sorry, not even my joke. So she has written present perfect or present perfect simple. This is for indefinite past time, so at some stage in the past, but we don't know when. Notice we can't say she has been writing 10 books since 1950. Well, we can, but it means she hasn't finished any of them. So she has written 10 books, or since 1950 she has written 10 books. We see it as being, although it might feel like it's about the past, it is the present perfect. Okay, let's have another example. Ich arbeite seit 2014 in Fechter. This is true for me. Could you translate it into English, please? Pause if you need to. Here's a little bit of help. Obviously our word order is different. And let's see my final version now. I have worked in Fechter since 2014, or I have been working in Fechter since 2014, so in that case with the present perfect continuous. In this particular example, there is no real difference in meaning. I suppose you could say that when you say I have been working, there's a focus on duration, on the time that it's lasted, whereas I have worked, there's more of a focus on result. But in this particular case, not so much of a difference, and that would also be the same with live, for example. Notice that the type of mistake that English speakers make in German. It's so tempting for me to say, ich habe in Fechter seit 2014 gearbeitet. That's so tempting. And so if you notice English speakers saying that kind of thing in German, that's because they're translating from English. In this kind of situation, you just use the present simple in German. But we don't. We use ich habe gearbeitet, even though for you that seems like a past tense. Okay? So that's quite a difference. Notice I can also say I have been working in Fechter not just since 2014, but I can say I've been working here since I arrived in Fechter. So since I arrived in Fechter has the same meaning as since 2014. It's a set time in the past. So let's have a look now at some time expressions. I'd like you please to put these time expressions into two different groups, and two of the expressions can be in either group. Please pause the video while you do this. I will give you the answers in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's look at these using the verb to play the violin, okay? The yellow ones are set time expressions in the past. I played the violin 2 weeks ago. That's a completed past action. The same with I played the violin yesterday, I played the violin last week, I played the violin when I was 10, and I played the violin when I arrived in Fechter. That sounds like I arrived in Fechter and then the next step was that I played the violin. In purple, this is between a set time in the past and now. I have played the violin since I arrived in Fechter, or since 2014, or I have been playing the violin since I arrived in Fechter, since 2014. They're basically the same. There could be a slight difference in meaning. If you say, I have played the violin since I arrived in Fechter, that's just a general statement that you didn't used to play the violin before, but you do now. I have been playing the violin since I arrived in Fechter can have that meaning as well. It can also have a more literal meaning. And if that was true, then my fingers would now be very bloody and they'd probably be quite hungry and sleep deprived. Let's look at the expressions which can be used for both. I played the violin for 6 years, so that was maybe I started in 1985 and I finished in 1991. So that started in the past and finished in the past. I played the violin for 6 years. But what year are we now? 2020. So if I started in 2014 and I still haven't given up, I can then say I have played the violin for 6 years, or I've been playing the violin for 6 years. Okay, so you can see that can be used for both. Once can be used for both, but with a change in meaning. If I say I once played the violin, that has the same meaning as I used to play the violin, or something along those lines. It's not true now, anyway. Whereas if I say I have played the violin once, then it means it really was a one-off time. I just tried it one time. Like I could say I've played the violin twice. That means on 2 separate occasions I've played the violin. So there is a change in meaning with once. Okay, let me tell you about a drinking game. In class, we normally play I've Never. Some of you will know it by the alternative name Never Have I Ever. Sadly, we don't have any drink when we play it. This is great for if you and some friends meet some people that you don't know in a bar, because you can say I've never, and then say something you've never done, and hopefully it's something embarrassing that one of your friends has done. Then that friend has to drink and tell the story. But let's focus on the grammar of this. If I say I've never broken an arm or a leg, that's true. Okay, so indefinite past time, from the moment I was born until now, touch wood, I've never broken an arm or a leg. But if someone had, and then they drank, then they would say, yes, I once broke my arm, okay, or I broke my arm 2 years ago, and what happened was blah blah blah. So now you're using the past simple. Whereas I've never, of course, I've never broken my arm, that's the present perfect. Okay, let's pause now. Please check your answers to the exercises on StudIP, and then we'll go through them in 3 seconds. That's about now. Exercise 1, gap fill. Number 1, past simple, completed past action. Number 2, present perfect continuous with focus on duration. Notice you can't say, I have waited for the bus for the last hour and it still hasn't arrived yet. Well, you could do in this case, but it would be more natural to say, I have been waiting. Number 3, completed past action. Notice it says a few years ago. Exercise 2, selection. Number 1, when he was a little boy is a time expression, so that's the same as if you say in 2005 or 15 years ago. Number 2, so you can't say be because then there would still be some cake left. So it's really A, the children have eaten it. However, I would also accept C, the children ate it. We don't know the context here, and I think in American English, increasingly people are starting to use the past simple in this kind of situation. Similarly, in American English, people use the past simple instead of the present perfect when words such as yet and already are involved. So an American might ask, I'd wonder if you want to join them to eat, and they might say, did you eat yet? That's awful, that sounds Australian, sorry. Whereas in British English, we'd still most commonly say, have you eaten yet? Or an American might say, did you eat already? Still sounds Australian. Sorry. And we'd ask, have you already eaten? Okay. In your grammar book, you will find information about the grammatical differences between American English and British English. If you're using My Grammar Lab Advanced, there's one page somewhere towards the back in the index, and other grammar books will also typically have those differences in the index. Okay. Exercise 3, error correction. Number 1, incorrect, for 1 hour. Number 2, correct, because it says last night. Imagine though that you and a friend had just parked your car somewhere and you were walking away from the car, and maybe you turn to your friend and you ask, did you lock the car door properly? Or have you locked the car door properly? Both of those would be fine. Okay? If you ask, did you lock it properly, you're thinking of a few seconds previously as being a set time in the past. But if you ask, have you locked the door properly, that's because it was such a recent event. You feel closely connected to it. 3, correct. And yet again, if you've just arrived home from the supermarket and you're unpacking your shopping, you can finish this sentence with, as I've done today, if you still feel as if you're in the process of going to the supermarket. 4. That's incorrect. It has to be Sue had her hair dyed purple before she went to university, so that could be in August, for instance. And C, that is correct. This time last year, that's the same as 12 months ago. It's a set time in the past. With number 5, you can also say no one had predicted, but that's not for today's class. It's for next week. Sorry, I need to quickly correct myself there. Not for next week, but for in a couple of days' time. Okay. One other thing I want to point out is that for the present perfect simple and the present perfect continuous, please do pay special attention to what it says in your book and do the exercises in the book as well. This is quite a complicated part of the grammar, but we have to get it right. I've tried to explain it as simply as I could do in this video, but it's not the same as teaching it in class. Okay, and now here's a video of me from yesterday saying goodbye. You know, the present perfect and present perfect continuous are a massive problem for speakers of German. Obviously, some individuals are different, but in general, they're a problem for German speakers. Typically, you try to use the present perfect instead of the past simple, and you try to use the present simple instead of the present perfect. This is really a case of trying to rewire your brain. So trying to use the language as much as you can, even when you're by yourself, and really focusing on the perfect aspect is incredibly important. After all, many of you are planning to be teachers. You certainly don't want people who can't get basics like that right in the classroom, right? And I think that pretty much everyone in the department would agree that for someone to get a BA in English Studies, you kind of need to be a master of tense and aspect. So right now, this is a good time for you to really get this right. I understand that in schools they can't concentrate on everything. We have to get this right. Okay, so really concentrate on your homework for this and come back to it again and again whenever you need to. Okay, in our next class, past perfect and past perfect continuous. See you then.